Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel we talk books, and today I am wrapping up the challenges that I have been participating in, hosting or just joining in with throughout 2024. So we're going to go through each of the challenges, starting off with the Sirens Reading Challenge, which was the big challenge that I was hosting this year. So in this challenge we had 8 prompts: TBR Temptress, Library Lorelei, Bookshop Babe, Digital Delilah, Volume Vamp, Classic Coquette, Fresh Femme Fatale and Suggestive Seductress. And these were broad categories where we could engage in mood reading without feeling like we were missing out on the experience of joining in with the challenge. That was kind of the overarching theme of this challenge, and I'm going to tell you about the 8 books that I read to complete this challenge. And I will just at the top of the video say this was the only challenge that I actually completed this year. It's been a bit of a weird year for me in terms of my reading, but I digress. The first category was TBR Temptress, and for this book I read The Colony by Audrey Magee. I read this quite some time ago and it had been a highly anticipated book on my TBR, something that I really wanted to read. And unfortunately for me it didn't quite live up to the expectations that I had placed around it. So this is a book that is about a man who is an artist, and he goes to this very remote island where there are only a few people living. It's part of Ireland, as in I-R-E-L-A-N-D, Ireland, and Island, I-S-L-A-N-D. That's part of the country of Ireland, is what I'm trying to say. And he also, another man who has been coming to this island for some years now, who has been tracking language, because on this island the people speak their own language, as in a dialect, and he is sort of tracking the ways in which other languages, including English, are impacting on the islanders. So it is a really interesting kind of concept, this artist who's trying to be somewhere remote that inspires him, that's kind of like, you know, away from the world, as it were. And then also this other man who sort of has this very particular view of the islanders, and then of course the islanders themselves and what they think about things, their own hopes and dreams and what they want out of life. So it's sort of like, I wanted to like this book so much and there were just a few elements that didn't quite get there for me, so that was a bit disappointing. It wasn't terrible, I still liked it, but it wasn't everything I'd hoped it to be. So that was the first book. Now these I'm doing these in prompt order, not chronological order of when I read them. But that's the first book. It was a little bit disappointing. The second book, for Library Lorelei, which is a book that I saw in the library and desperately wanted to read. In this case, it was my library's audiobook collection, because I listened to this one on audio and subsequently purchased a copy of the book itself. Is this one, The Resilience Myth: New Thinking on Grit, Strength and Growth After Trauma by Soraya Chemaly. This was amazing. I really loved it, and it was definitely something that made me think, and definitely a book that I want to reread, hence buying myself a copy, because I actually want to go through and annotate it at some point, which I will hopefully do maybe in the new year, we'll see. But essentially this is a book about what we have been what we are led to believe about resilience is, and it being an individual pursuit and something that we have to do, have to become, like it's the ultimate aim for us to be hyper individual, and this author is really exploring how that's not really what actual resilience is. Resilience takes part in community, and also it's not something that you know, this hyper individualism isn't necessarily what we really need. So I was really inspired by this book. It definitely affirmed things I had already been thinking about resilience and sort of gave me a framework within which to think about it. So I'm really keen to get back to this one and reread it at some point, annotate it, as I said, and really just let the knowledge kind of percolate in my brain again. So this was a fantastic read. Very, very happy about this one. Another 5-star book that I read, which was for the 3rd prompt, and it's the one that I've finished the most recently, and it's why I can say that I did finish the prompt, all of the prompts in 2024, and that was for Bookshop Babe. So this is a book that I saw in a bookshop and was very excited to get, and that is Psykhe by Kate Forsyth. This is a myth retelling of Psyche and Eros, and it's amazing. So I feel like I want to be a myth retelling girly. Like, I really want to be the kind of person who really loves myth retellings. I'm drawn to them. I buy them. I don't always read them. This one, like, obviously the cover is a factor because it's absolutely stunning. But also I've read Kate Forsyth before and I have liked her work. So I gave this one a go. I bought it. I let it sit for a little while. I shouldn't have slept on this one. This was amazing. Again, I listened to this one on audiobook, but I had already purchased this copy. So yeah, I'm so glad that I actually read this, and it's everything that I wanted in a myth retelling, especially because a lot of the myth retellings that we're getting now are very feminist myth retellings, and in some cases that feminism feels like a real insert, and here it was so well done, and actually elements of this tale kind of lent themselves to that retelling. So yeah, anyway, I loved this, and I think it was so well researched, so well written, fantastic, highly recommend. So then for the 4th book, this was Digital Delilah. So this is an ebook that I read, so obviously I don't have a physical copy of this one, and that is Passing Strange by Ellen Klages. I don't know if I'm saying that surname correct, but Passing Strange was an interesting book that was a really interesting historical fiction, but also had magical realism or fantasy elements to it. There was a little bit of magic in it. And for this one, that magic felt like the insert. Like, it felt like she had written this historical tale and then had, because it was published by Tor.com, who published fantasy, it feels like the fantasy was kind of added in to make it publishable by Tor.com. Anyway, that was, I don't know if that's what happened, but that's how it felt to me. So this was a really interesting one. It was set in, or I can't recall the exact decade, but I'm going to say 1930s, maybe. Oh my gosh, where was it set? San Francisco, and it was the 40s. Okay, apologies everyone. It was 1940s San Francisco, and it was also very queer, as in LGBTQIA plus story, and it very much focused mostly on lesbians or lesbian relationships, and also there was an element of cross-dressing, or biologically female people dressing to appear male at a time where that was against the law, and people were being jailed or prosecuted for doing such things. So that aspect of it was really, really good. And then there was just this weird magical element that was kind of felt very much like an add-on. And I kind of forgot through most of the story that it was there, because it happened at the beginning, and then I forgot, and it came back in again towards the end. I was like, oh yeah, magic. That's right, there's magic in this book. So yeah, it just sort of felt a little bit odd in that way. So that was a mixed bag for me. I liked it, didn't love it. In the same boat, for the next prompt for number 5. Oh, hello Xanthi. We have Kat. Hi Xanthi. Have you come to be in the video? In the same boat we had number 5, Volume Vamp. So this was an audiobook that I listened to, and that I went through my audiobooks that were available to me, and I was like, that's the one I want to read. And that was Salonika Burning. I also have a physical copy of it. And it's by Gail Jones, who is an Australian author. This one was a mixed bag for me. There were elements of it that I really liked, but at the beginning of the book, so this is based on 4 real people who there is documented evidence that they were in the same location at the same time, or not in roughly the same time, but there's no documented evidence that they actually knew each other. So this is kind of like an invented story about these 4 people who may or may not have ever met each other in real life, despite the fact that they all were in the same place at roughly the same time. So this is, the 4 people are Australians Miles Franklin and Olive King, and British painters Grace Palethorpe and Stanley Spencer. So these 4 people went to Salonika in Macedonia and were there in 1917, where there was, as part of the war, a big fire destroyed the city. It was sort of, I don't believe that the fire was because of the war, but the war was happening at the same time that this fire occurred and kind of like destroyed the city of Salonika, hence Salonika Burning. And these 4 people were stationed nearby and had been in and out of Salonika itself during that time. And essentially, the thing that kind of I ended up taking away from this, so first of all, other than the man, the 3 women at the beginning of the story felt very indistinct to me. They didn't feel like they had distinct personalities and voices in the story. That did start to change as the story went on, and I could distinguish between them. But that was not a good start. And then the other thing that I took away from it was, these are real people and you're fictionalizing their lives. And I know that that happens in books, like it happens quite a bit, but for some reason in this particular book, it just didn't sit right with me. I guess because as the reader, you kind of start to incorporate this information about these people. And although I don't know 3 of them, Miles Franklin I do know quite well, not personally obviously, but I know of her because she's an Australian author who we have a big literary prize that's named after her, actually 2 that are named after her. So she's like a big part of my knowledge, like I have knowledge about her, and I guess I found myself incorporating this information from the book into my knowledge of her, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, possibly 0 of these things happened. And so that just sort of felt a little bit weird to me. So yeah, I don't know, there's sort of like I get a weird vibe around books where you've got a real person and then you're fictionalizing their life with scant information, might I add. So that was that one. Again, just didn't quite meet my expectations. However, the next one definitely did. Actually, it exceeded my expectations. And that was for Classic Coquette. And the book that I chose was A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This was excellent. I loved this book. I read it back in January. So it was one of the first books that I read this year. And oh my gosh, I loved it so much. It was such a... so let me give you a quick plot overview before I get into my feelings about it. So we have 2 men who have, it's just after the Great War, and they are both independently arrive in a small town called Oxgodby, and they both have projects that they've been hired to work on. One of them is restoring a mural in a church, and the other one is attempting to locate a grave that has over time has not, like, nobody is 100% sure where this grave is, but they feel pretty confident that it's somewhere nearby. So these two men come independently to the town, and they are working on their projects, and it's sort of a little bit about how their lives intersect, and also eventually how their projects a little bit intersect. So it was great. I really loved it. The characters were just amazing. I loved the townspeople. I loved the two men. They were so interesting in their own ways and their own voices. Who they were as people, how they were affected by the war, and so on. It was great. Highly, highly recommend. Then we have Fresh Femme Fatale. So this is a book that was published in 2024, and I did read several books that were published in 2024, but the one that I chose for this prompt was Magnolia Woo, Unfolds It All by Chanel Miller. So I read Chanel Miller's, what was it called? Know My Name, and which is obviously not a children's book. This obviously is a children's book. So Know My Name was her memoir of being sexually assaulted, and the ensuing court case, and then sort of what happened. This is her, and I read that book, and it was 5 stars for me a couple of years ago. I think it's amazing. So basically, I felt then at the time that she would be an excellent author because, you know, writing a memoir is a thing that lots of people do, but not all of those people necessarily go on to then write fiction and write other books other than other memoirs maybe. And I was just like, the writing is just amazing in this book. I feel like this person is going to go on and maybe have a literary career. And then the first thing that she puts out post her memoir is a children's book, and I was like, well, I'm going to read that. And it's great. It's such a great little story. You've got two girls who, one who has, her parents own a laundromat in New York, in New York City, and she has she's a sort of a quirky kid without friends, and then she makes a friend and they go on this adventure. So as part of the laundromat, she has been collecting odd socks that have been left behind and pinning them up onto a pinboard, and so they take it upon themselves to see if they can find the owners of all of these socks. And that is a cute story anyway. And then also they're just great characters, and they go around and they sort of meet all of these people or get to know people that they might only know peripherally from coming to the laundromat or having sort of interactions with them, but they get to know them, and it's sort of a found family community situation, and it's really sweet, and I really liked it. It was such a good little book. And then for the last prompt, this is for Suggestive Seductress, a book recommended to you. So this was, I can't even recall who recommended the book, but obviously it was nominated for a prize, so I guess that's a recommendation in and of itself as well. So this was the Women's Prize? The Women's Prize, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it's Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammad. This was amazing. So it's set in Palestine, and on this woman who has been living in the UK returns to her home to visit family after sort of having a bit of a devastating kind of life upset moment, and she goes to Palestine, and then she ends up kind of being roped into performing as part of a Hamlet production on the West Bank, and it's in Arabic, and it's sort of very much kind of about, it is political, but it's mostly about people, I would say. And it's a really, really interesting book, and I really, really liked it. I thought the writing was very interesting. The style of this one was quite interesting too, because there's elements of it that are script, and that was an interesting sort of format decision, along with just the storyline itself. So really fantastic. So those were the 8 books that I read for the Sirens Reading Challenge. I hope that everybody who took part in the challenge really enjoyed doing it and found it fun. I have decided that for 2025 I don't think I'm going to be hosting another challenge. I'm going to take a break from hosting challenges for next year, and we'll see how we go. Maybe at some point in the year we might do something, but I don't want to do a year-long challenge is basically where I am with it. But this has been an interesting experiment, I guess you could say. Okay, so let's move on now to some of the other challenges that I took part in this year. So another challenge that I set for myself was 24 books, 24 and 24. And I selected 24 books from my physical TBR towards the end of last year. And I was like, okay, these are the books I want to prioritize in 2024. Did I read all of them? No, I did not. I did not read all of them, but I did do pretty well. So I'm not going to show these books to you. I'm just going to tell you about them, and I will put up on the screen the graphic that I had made for the 24 and 24, and so you can see the covers. So here it is. So I might even just shuffle a little bit here so that it can just sit there. Okay, so the books that I read from this list in 2024 were Strong Female Character by Fern Brady, Another Day in the Colony by Chelsea Watego. I did attempt to read All Our Families. I'll come back to that one. Okay, let's skip. That's it for that line. Second line, I read two of the books. One was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Another one was A Month in the Country, which I mentioned just before, by J.L. Carr. In the next row, I read Sanditon by Jane Austen. I read Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett. A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. The next row down, I read Heartstopper, Autumn. So Heartstoppers by Alice Oseman, Autumn's by Ali Smith. In the next row down, I only read Devotion by Hannah Kent. And then in the bottom row, I read Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood and The Conversion by Amanda Lowry. So then I also had two DNFs, so books that I attempted to read and for one reason or other decided not to continue with. And I count those because they're off my TBR. So All Our Families was one of them, and I had some issues with some of the sweeping statements that the author was making in the book, and I decided to DNF it for that reason. And then the other book I DNF'd was The Razor's Edge by W. Somerset Maugham, and that one was because of the obsession that the author seemed to have with how fat a teenage girl was, and just kept going on and on and on about it, and I just couldn't. So then I'm going to put a clip in here to show you the 10 books that I have left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ooh, 9. What isn't there? Oh! Now I'm going to show you the 9 books I haven't even attempted yet. And then completely forgot that this one I started and haven't finished. It's Song of the Sun God by Shankari Chandran. The reason that I paused this book was I was reading it in the middle of winter, and it definitely felt like a summer book. So it's one that I'm going to potentially take away with me and finish on my holiday at the beginning of January. So this one is underway. So I've got 9 books to show you that I have not yet read. Now, what I'm going to do, let me just show them first. I'll show you them first. So here are the books that are left that I did not read in my 24 challenge. The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens, Piranesi by Susanna Clark, Of Women and Salt by Gabriela Garcia, This All Come Back Now edited by Michaela Saunders, Monsters by Claire Dederer, A Room with a View by E.M. Forster, The Living Sea of Waking Dreams by Richard Flanagan, and When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhelm. Now, what I'm going to do with those 9 books, plus, of course, the Song of the Sun Gone, so let's call it 10. 10 books that I didn't finish for the challenge or didn't come off my TBR, and I was inspired by someone who I'm in an online forum with, or a what do you call it, a Discord group with, who has made hers. So she did a similar thing where she put together a list of books that she was going to read, and she's now, any of the books that she didn't finish from this year's list, she's not putting onto her 2025 list. She's made a separate list called Second Chance Books, and those are the books that have she didn't get to as part of that challenge. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have a Second Chance Books list, and it will have those 10 books on it, and I will attempt to read those. They will be sort of like second tier priorities, because it seems crazy to me to kind of just keep putting them on my these books are a priority list when obviously I didn't prioritize them. So Second Chance Books, and I think the thing with these will be, if I don't read them maybe by the end of the year, like I'm not going to hard and fast be like they've got to get out of the house, but if I don't read them by the end of the year, then I'm going to have a long hard look at them at the end of the year and decide if they actually are a priority, or if they're maybe not books that I actually want to read. Because I guess you get excited by things and then you kind of, new sparkly things happen and you kind of, you don't forget about them, but like they just become less of a priority. So anyway, potentially that's what's happened here. Maybe. So anyway, that's my 24 in 24. So those are the books that I attempted to read and didn't quite get there for. The other prizes that, the other challenges that I set for myself were reading from the Miles Franklin Award, the aforementioned Miles Franklin Award, and also the Stella Prize, which is also named after Miles Franklin because Stella is her actual first name. So let's talk about the Stella Prize first, because that one was announced first, and then so I had the long list earlier. Now I read a good amount of these, so there were 12 books in total, and I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 12, so that's pretty good. There was another book that I DNF'd, which was called Abandon Every Hope, because it was a book about abattoirs, and it was a little bit too graphic and I just didn't want to read it, so I decided to DNF that one. So that one is off the TBR. So from that, I actually only have 3 books left that I need to read to have read all of the books, and those are Eden Glassy by Melissa Lukashenko, and I really want to read this, so I don't know why I didn't. I didn't read this and I really wanted to. Weird. And the other one was West Girls by Laura Elizabeth Woolett. This one I have mixed feelings about. I don't know if I want to read it or not, so I don't know how much of a priority it is. But Eden Glassy, I definitely want to read, so maybe I'll put this one on my 25 in 25 if that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I'm going to call it. A quick little addition here, because I realised I forgot to talk about one of the books because I didn't have a physical copy, and that is The Anniversary by Stephanie Bishop. So this is another book that was on the Stella Prize long list that I didn't get to, so I would need to read that one as well to complete the Stella Prize. That's all I needed to say. Just forgot to say it at the time when I was talking about the Stella Prize. Back to the original video. So that's the Stella Prize. I'm pretty pleased with the progress that I made with that one. Now there was a little bit of overlap with the Stella Prize and the Miles Franklin Award, and that was Eden Glassy, which I didn't read, but also there were 2 other books that were on both lists. So one was Hospital by Sanya Rushdie, and the other one was, which I did read, and the other was Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright, which I also read. So those ones I read. Now out of the Miles Franklin Award long list, there were only 10 books, not 12, and of those I've only read 4, and I DNF'd 1. So the 4 that I read were Wall by Jen Craig, the two that I just mentioned before, and Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. The one I DNF'd was The Belle of the World. Yeah, The Belle of the World by Gregory Day. And I DNF'd that one because it had a weird quote-unquote relationship between an older grandfather age man and a pre-18 years old girl. And it was talked about in relatively positive terms, and I was like, I'm not here for this. And also it was some of the wording in the book was very, like, it was long-winded and pretentious, and I just didn't like it. Anyway, so the ones that I have left to read from the Miles Franklin Literary Award are Eden Glacier, of course, Anam by Andre Dow, Strangers at the Port by Lauren Amy Curtis, The Sitter by Angela O'Keeffe, which I'm also really excited about. So I'm not 100% sure why I didn't actually read that one. And Only Sound Remains by Hossein Asghari. So those are the ones that I would need to read to have read all of them. Now, obviously, in a moment of impulse, I purchased the entire long list with the intention of reading it, and then it just didn't happen. So that's a thing. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see if we actually get to those ones. We'll try. Okay, so that's it for the challenges that I've taken part in this year. Hopefully you found this video interesting. Now I guess my challenge is to think about what I'm going to do about the books I didn't get to in those challenges. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with how I went. And also, I made a point of not overdoing it this year in terms of how important it was in my brain to finish the challenge, because I think in previous years I've put a lot of pressure on myself to always be trying to finish these challenges. But what I really set out to do this year was definitely to be thinking more about what I actually wanted to read. And if I didn't feel like reading any of these books, then I just didn't, and I read something else. So that, I think, has been a really good thing for me. I'm pleased that that's what I've allowed myself to do. Did I put a little bit of pressure on myself? Yes, I did. Of course I did. But I feel like I had a better balance this year in terms of what I wanted to achieve and being realistic and kind to myself in terms of what I could achieve. So, and the fact that those two things did not align is okay. All right, so let me know down in the comments below about your thoughts on any of the books that we've talked about in this video. If there's any of those books that I mentioned that I haven't yet read that you think I should prioritize, I would love to know about that. Convince me, basically. Convince me that I need to read these books and to prioritize them next year. Maybe I'll put all of these ones onto my second chance books as well and see how that goes. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've had an amazing reading year in 2024. I'm excited to see what 2025 is going to bring us. We're going to go in and we're just going to see what happens, see where the reading road takes us, and hopefully read some amazing books next year. So I will see you in 2025 with my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye!